Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I want to talk about Aaron Rodgers, if he is the right fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and what will that take. We also get an interview with Kaleb Johnson from back when we were talking to him during practices and talking to the Steelers' new secondary coach, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. More on them later. All right, Steelers fans, hope you had a great weekend. Happy belated Father's Day to all the fathers out there, especially my dad. Want to get us ready for how the rest of this offseason is going to go. So minicamp is completed. There are several interviews that I've done and also parts of interviews that I've done where we were in scrums or I had a couple one-on-ones that I'm going to start parsing back through, cutting up, and then talking about with you on this show, with whether it's just me on the show or with a guest, and sprinkling that out throughout the rest of the offseason. We'll also be answering a lot of your phone calls because let me tell you, I think I'm up to 100 different phone calls that are still relevant questions from you all that I haven't been able to get to yet. As always, if you want to call to get your question on the show, it's 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from, keep your question under a minute, and we try to get it on the show. We're going to start today off with a question because this question, and there's lots of questions about it, came after the Aaron Rodgers signing, and there are a lot of Aaron Rodgers questions, and trust me, we will address to them as we go throughout the rest of this summer leading into training camp. But this question I thought was asked very well about the temperament that I have addressed the Aaron Rodgers situation since before he signed, before we knew he would sign, when we were talking about he would sign, and now that he's officially signed and we've seen him live at some Steelers practices. Here's a question from Jay all the way out in Eden Prairie, Minnesota.
Hey, Chris. It's Jay from Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and I just watched your latest take on the Rodgers signing where you said you had told everybody that this Rodgers signing was going to happen. And I guess my question to you is, do you agree with it? Because you've gone back and forth over the past 6 months espousing the benefits, but also the detriments. And so how are you planning to square that with how you communicate with Aaron? And also, what do you think the immediate impact is on the organization, including Mason Rudolph, and how that is communicated? Love your show. Love the Northside podcast, Duquesne graduate, and keep it up. Love you, bro. Bye.
Thank you, Jay. Also, shout out to a Duquesne grad there. There's the local tie-in. So, Jay, lots of layers to this question. Let's go step by step here in what we're looking at. So, first, I want to talk about the positives and negatives. What I always try to do when we're talking about potentials and futures and what may happen, I'm breaking down games and I'm breaking down everything. I always try to find the positives for the Steelers, the negatives for the Steelers, and where things may actually lie in between. And so for Aaron Rodgers, I've said for a while, like once we were kind of pretty sure it was going to happen, we started to kind of like say, okay, well, let's look at what this could bring to the table. As I've said from the get-go, Aaron Rodgers' recent past has not been the best. His last season was a 5-win season with the Jets. They went 5-12 with him as the starter. His season before that, he went 8-9 with the Packers. Now, granted, you can't always put wins. Wins are not a quarterback stat. You can't always put that all on the quarterback. But it is not encouraging to see that the teams that he was with the last two times he's played a full season to have not done well. And this is a Steelers organization that has prided itself on at least getting to the tournament, even when they're not, even to the NFL playoffs. That is, even when they don't have like one of the NFL's better rosters to put out there. And so I still think Aaron Rodgers does bring to the table the intellect and the cerebral skills of a experienced NFL quarterback who can read defenses and adjust. Where I do think the questions will come for the Steelers is how does he deal with adversity with them? Because you've seen with these last few years, like, when the Steelers have hit a rough spot outside of the last 4 games of the regular season last year. Usually when the Steelers hit a rough spot, they rebound in seasons. And you go back to, the year before last year in 2023, then they fell to 7-7 and they rebounded. They won 3 straight, even with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, and they went on to make it to the playoffs. Despite the rough patch that they hit. And oftentimes on Mike Tomlin's teams, they bounce back. But will they be able to bounce back with Aaron Rodgers? How will he impact their team? I think that there's always a lot of things that are made out of, the national narratives that go into things. But I think there's reasonable questions about Aaron Rodgers and what he means to the teams that he's been on. When it comes to, has he been the reason the Jets blew up? Now, maybe he's not responsible for everything, but we saw the looks that he gave Robert Saleh leading up to him getting fired. We saw, the questions around the organization. We saw the moves they made just to appease him. But again, that's where I think the Steelers might get a break from Aaron Rodgers, from that part of Aaron Rodgers, in that they aren't handing him some, $150 million contract over 3 years. They aren't handing him the keys to the offense and the keys to the whole team and giving him all this power. They're saying, hey, come in and be part of what we're doing right now. And that I think is fine. Now, as far as how I address Aaron Rodgers, I address him the same way that I address every other player, whether I think that player is, a superstar talent like TJ Watt or Cam Hayward, or I think that player needs to keep working their butt off to make the roster. Like I have talked to DeMarvin Leal when I've had clips of him on the show. We will continue to do that throughout the show. That doesn't change. But at the same time, as far as what I think Aaron Rodgers should be doing if he's the Steelers quarterback, I think that there's going to be a lot of expectations for him to not fall into the pitfalls that a lot of these other quarterbacks have fallen into when it comes to how defenses are trying to counteract them. There's going to be a lot of expectations for him to be able to think through and adjust through what teams are trying to do to take away what the Steelers, want Aaron Rodgers to be able to do, and to kind of make sure that this offense gets on a pace. Because the bottom line here is this: Aaron Rodgers, again, is not the Steelers' new franchise quarterback. He's the bridge guy. He's the guy to get you to next year, where you can have he could be part of kind of steadying the ship on offense, establishing an identity. And if you have that identity going into next season and your offensive line's better and your running game's better and your playmakers kind of have a better fit for where they fit in the offense, and there's an easier blueprint to kind of spell out for what your offense can be when it's running on all cylinders, or at least more cylinders than it has been the past several years. That can be the ticket to lay the foundation and set up a nice setup for a rookie quarterback to come into and kind of just not have to do everything, kind of like the way Ben Roethlisberger came into the Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger came in, and yes, they won 14, 15 straight starts with him at quarterback, but he wasn't the driving force in all of those wins. I'd say most of those wins, it was the run game and the defense, and then he would come in and make a big play here and there because he was fitting in. That's where I think the Steelers want their rookie to do when they do draft him, and presumably they're drafting one next year. But I think that's also what they want to have Aaron Rodgers be part of setting up, is that he's going to be able to conduct an offense. He's going to be able to talk to guys and be like, hey, this is what's expected if we're going to be a good offense this year. Arthur Smith, for all the reasonable complaints about how things didn't go last year, whether it was giving the power to Russell Wilson to change plays, whether it was the lack of a run game towards the end of the season after it had started off pretty well. Arthur Smith, I think, is a guy who's going to have a chance to adapt his offense around a guy like Aaron Rodgers that could do some of the things that I think Arthur Smith likes to do, like play action passes over the middle. Aaron Rodgers, extremely efficient in doing that over the course of his career. Arthur Smith loves to do that. But to have a good play action pass quarterback, you need to have a guy who's taller. They didn't have that with Russ Wilson. You also need to have a quarterback that's pretty experienced in handling pressure and adjusting to it and getting that quick release off. That's not something that they've really had before Aaron Rodgers on the team. And on top of all of that, you need to have a run game that scares defenses and forces them to fly up to the line of scrimmage so fast that the play action does get guys wide open over the middle. So I think Aaron Rodgers can be part of the solution, and I've maintained that, and I still think he can be a part of them winning 10, 11 games even this year, and maybe even winning a playoff game. I don't think he makes them Super Bowl contenders, but whether or not he does that, that's up to him. And to me, as a journalist, as a person who covers them for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as a person who covers them for this podcast and talks about them, as we see Aaron Rodgers, we will judge how Aaron Rodgers is in his career based on week-to-week performances. He'll get grades just like everyone else does with the stars and skulls grades that we do, and we'll take it step by step because that's what we're supposed to do. And I don't want to, my predictions of how things are going to go don't dictate my evaluations. I think that's the big thing that often happens is that a lot of people when they really like a player or they are evaluating something, they allow their predictions to kind of seep into it, and it kind of corrupts the grading there. I work very hard to not do that. And I think with Aaron Rodgers, my predictions kind of be like, I think he'll be better than Mason Rudolph and Will Howard. I think that he'll provide a steadying presence in the offense, so long as things don't go kerfloo on the Steelers and fly off the handle rail. But I think if the rest of the team is taking a step up and a lot of this younger offensive line's taking a step up, I think he'll be a guy to help keep the ship pointed steady on offense and maybe put them in a place where they can be more competitive than they have been in recent years. So thank you for the question, Jay. We appreciate your question here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. As always, you can call like Jay did to 412-223-6644. Leave your name, where you're from. Keep your question under a minute. We'll try to get your question on the show. Again, we have many calls lined up, but don't be afraid to call. I save everyone into like a file, and then I go through them and I start picking them through for the show. So we're done with calls today, but I want to get to a one-on-one interview I got with Kaleb Johnson, the Steelers rookie running back out of Iowa, because I thought there were some interesting things that he said, and there's some things that I think could really work out with him in establishing that run game that's going to make life easier for Aaron Rodgers, and also maybe help the Steelers establish that identity of the new offense that they want for the future rookie quarterback to come into the team. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Game Time. There's nothing like the atmosphere of the NBA Finals. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every momentum feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of that electricity without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, NBA Finals tickets, whatever you're into. When demand is sky high, prices on the app actually go down as the tip-off gets closer. And their last-minute ticket deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why everyone should use Game Time. The all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay. The seat view feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like in the venue. It's so reassuring. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference of those prices. Game Time makes scoring NFL tickets just as easy. You can get great seats for as low as $100 thanks to exclusive discounts. So go ahead and get those Steelers tickets early, Steelers fans. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here. Now, a lot will be made about this offense from several different aspects. Now, everyone's going to be talking about Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf. There's two new big names that have been added to this offense. And look, those are big deals. Aaron Rodgers is a four-time MVP, future first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback. Who knows if he's going to be great or if he's going to be kind of like he was with the Jets last year. We'll see that. But also DK Metcalf coming to the Steelers, a big name wide receiver with big playability to come in and to replace George Pickens after they traded him away, or I guess before they traded him away. But still, DK Metcalf, being part of this picture. Everyone's going to look at those two factors right there. But as I've said before, the offensive line, I think, is going to be the most important part of this offense that has to manifest this season. It's going to be about them, opening up holes in the run game and also protecting their quarterback and being more confident in doing so and keeping up the chemistry. But the guy that I don't want people to take for granted just existing is the Steelers' third-round pick and rookie running back, Kaleb Johnson out of Iowa. Kaleb Johnson's a guy who I think could be a great fit for the Steelers long-term. I talked about them during the draft process, thought he'd be an ideal pick. Didn't think he'd be around for the Steelers in the third round when they were heading into the second round. But lo and behold, he was, and that led to the Steelers getting their guy. Now, I talked to Kaleb Johnson, and I think it's cool to kind of get the demeanor of these guys as they're figuring things out throughout, rookie camp, OTAs, mini camp, and to learn more about them. So if you want to get a gist of what kind of player, what kind of person Kaleb Johnson is, here was my one-on-one interview that I got with him towards the end of OTAs for the Steelers. So this is a couple weeks back, but I want you to particularly pay attention to the answer he gives for the last question I ask when I ask him about how he's handling something in practice, and then I'll give you my sort of insight in how he's been doing so far. But here's Steelers rookie running back Kaleb Johnson. Kaleb, full 2 weeks of OTAs in. How do you feel about your progress and how you're learning things?
Nah, man. I feel like I'm doing good, man. I feel like I'm just learning day by day, and me and Will just learning the offense like day by day. Just learning from the older guys and the vets. So just come out here, just having fun, and just getting used to play best man can right now.
What's your feel for Eddie Faulkner now that you've had a few weeks working with him?
Oh man, I love that, man. Me and him already built a genuine connection since the 30 visit and stuff like that. So I'm just looking forward to working with him more and doing great things in the future.
What's he been teaching you the most, or you think he's tried to profess upon you the most to work on?
Just like the plays and the little things like the route running and just mainly pass protection and stuff like that, and getting most of the stuff down now. So he's really making progress. So it's really coming together.
You seem like a guy that can be very versatile, like the explosiveness, the quickness, the speed. You put it together. Yeah. What's it like? You did that a little bit at Iowa. What's it take to kind of translate that to the NFL when there's so many other details you have to work?
I feel like just keep being you, and don't try to do too much, and just take it day by day, and just keep working. So
I know it's still early in the process. You got mini camp next week, but you're a physical guy. Was there ever an urge that you're like when you guys are doing those 7 shots, or that you're like, I can't wait for the pads to come on?
Like I'm intentionally running to the defenses so they can punch the ball, and so I can really work on my ball security and continue to have 0 fumbles.
So that last question right there, I thought it was interesting the way he answered it, because I'd watched him after that because that was the last OTAs practice, or after the last OTAs practice. So I had seen him kind of running the ball a little bit, but I hadn't paid too much attention to it because I'm always watching different things on every play. But as I counted throughout all of minicamp, every carry, he did that. He would run to defenders. Heck, he ran to defenders out of bounds after plays, after runs were finished on a play. And everyone tried to knock it out, and no one ever did. I think that could be a really big thing for the Steelers if they can get a running back that can have the ball security that Najee Harris brought to the table and also be an explosive player. But I think there's a lot to like about Kaleb Johnson. And the more that I talk to him, the more I get a sense that hey, he's not rushing anything. He's not feeling like he's owed anything. He's coming in. He's just doing his job. He's getting better at things. I think he has a respect for Jaylen Warren's abilities that are more polished because he's been in the NFL for longer. But do not make the mistake to think that Kaleb Johnson is just going to be a guy, or just going to be a guy who's going to who can't turn into big plays. I think that was Najee Harris's biggest issue, was that he could run hard, he could hit the holes, but he couldn't turn the small gains into big gains too easily. And I think that was part of just his build, right? He was a tall, thick running back who was strong, and he could score, he could make big plays, but he didn't have that explosiveness to turn decent gains into breakaway gains, big gains. And Kaleb Johnson is a guy who I think can do that. And if you look at on Pro Football Focus, they have a stat where it's called breakaway runs, which is basically getting how many times did you get runs of 15 yards or more. And when it comes to the amount of total breakaway runs that he had, as a percentage of the total runs that he had, 56.1% of was the breakaway rate that he had, where he could turn a run into a big run. And that was the highest rate of any running back who had at least around like 180 so carries in college football last year. That was a higher rate than Ashton Jeanty, who was the first running back off the board, and deservedly so. As far as the yards that he was able to get. So there's a lot of his yards that he was able to create last year for Iowa that turned into breakaway yards because he was able to read the field. I think that's the really cool thing, is that this is a guy who looks for contact. He's good at engaging contact. When you look at yards after contact in college football last year, the most last year was Ashton Jeanty, which is again why he went so high, with an average of 5.25 yards after contact on average. But the number 2 guy in the country was Kaleb Johnson with 4.42, and that was even ahead of Omarion Hampton, who was right behind him at 4.35 yards after contact, per attempt. That's where I think that things could be really interesting with Kaleb Johnson, is that he has the breakaway rate, is that he does get good breakaway yards, in his work, but he also makes guys miss. And when I watched his film, it wasn't the making guys miss that made me the most impressed. It was how he set up his blockers. His patience was so important. His timing was so important. So many times I saw Le'Veon Bell-like instincts at times, with his ability to kind of process what the defense was doing, use it to his advantage, and then be able to to stack linemen to be able to make the blocks for him so that he doesn't have to make everybody miss and he'd get yards. If Kaleb Johnson brings that to the table at the run game, it's going to make it real hard to keep Jaylen Warren in if he's able to make those kind of plays. But I think Jaylen Warren is still a very good option to have to start the year, to give Kaleb Johnson a bit of a cushion to figure things out. But there's legit excitement around this guy. And again, it's still going to take this offensive line coming to fruition, right? Like Broderick Jones is going to need to be really good at left tackle. Zach Frazier is going to need to make progress at center. Mason McCormick at guard. And then, of course, you're going to want Troy Fautanu to get his first real action and to kind of hit the ground running for the Steelers, and they build chemistry. That's going to be a big task. Will they even pull it off? I don't know. But if they do, Kaleb Johnson could be the one reaping the benefits for many years to come. And if he gets that, I think he can be a very dangerous running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers moving forward, especially with the attitude that I've seen him go about things in the early days of rookie camp, OTAs, now, of course, mini camp. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to go over a scrum we had with the Steelers secondary coach. That's Gerald Alexander. His journey around the NFL has included the Steelers twice now, and I think it's kind of interesting, the interest that they've shown in him. We'll talk about that next year on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our episode here today. I want to switch to the secondary for a little bit here, because there was an interview with Gerald Alexander, or a scrum with Gerald Alexander. We all got to talk to him. Now, if you don't know who Gerald Alexander is, that's the new Steelers DBs coach. He had been, a couple of years back, the Steelers assistant DBs coach under Grady Brown. But then took a job to be the Raiders safety coach this past year. And then the Steelers called him back. It was like, hey, we'd like you to be our secondary coach overall. And then he took that. And since he's been back, I've heard a lot of praise from the players for him. All three of Joey Porter Jr., Corey Trice, and even Minka Fitzpatrick were like, no, we wanted that guy here because he addresses us. He calls it out. And I think that's the thing that they're looking for. They need the Steelers need a secondary coach that's going to be aggressive and demanding greatness in their communication, because their communication is so important and vital to what they're trying to do in the secondary, because they want to have these complex schemes under Terrell Austin. They want to have these different switch ups that allow quarterbacks to think, oh, they're in this coverage. Oh no, they're in this coverage. I threw the ball, and make those big mistakes. But it takes time to get there. And so Gerald Alexander, I think, has been a real stickler for details, even in practice with third stringers and fourth stringers. And that's stuff that I think can resonate moving forward. But without further ado, let's get to the interview that I had, or well, I guess the scrum that we had with Gerald Alexander when we were talking to him I believe this was the first day of Steelers minicamp.
Minka talked about being, everyone when I say thumbs up, the other guy says thumbs up, thumbs down, matching that. How do you guys work on those kind of communication fixes this early in the offseason?
Again, it's a main source of how we can have any success on any given play. I always kind of use the analogy of Monopoly. And if you land on the chance square, then you have a chance at really anything. But at least you have a chance. And so great communication just simply gives us a chance. It doesn't necessarily guarantee to us having success, but we know that if we give good verbal and nonverbal communication to make sure that we're all on the same page, we have a chance of executing success on that given play.
Gerald, what excited you about coming back?
I mean, a lot of the things with the people that I had experienced prior, obviously with Coach Tomlin and his leadership and the things that I've learned with my time here, and ultimately some of the players. It's just another great opportunity to have one of these 32 jobs, more specifically for this franchise and for these people.
The younger guys, especially too, were very excited that you were back. We talked to Corey, talked to Joey, and they were like, "Hey, we're so happy that guy's back in the room." How excited are you to work with those guys as young players again?
Extremely excited. Obviously I saw these guys as pups, and obviously got a chance to observe what their progression was as I departed to go to my little internship in Vegas. But just to come back and to just help them out in their career where they are and continue to build them and develop them at this stage, man, it's a very exciting opportunity that I'm grateful for.
Do they look like different players now?
I mean, yeah, a little bit physically, but ultimately there's a process to having whatever it is as you try to develop them for this 2025 season. So those are the things that we're looking forward to as far as building their technical, their fundamental things, and obviously their football intellect as they're out there on the field.
You're a very vocal coach. Last week we got to see, I saw you pressing guys to make sure you were setting up disguises, and hey, you're telling guys like, hey, you're not making me believe that you're in man. How have you seen these guys respond to that style of coaching versus what they were used to before?
I can't, comment on anything that they were used to before. I just know that, in order for anything to get done, and I know Chris Peterson used to say this all the time when I was a GA in Washington, to do anything great takes a lot of passion and a lot of energy in order to get what you got to get done. And so that's what I try to display out here and just give them the understanding of the urgency of how we got to get things done in a timely manner so we can move on to hopefully higher levels of conversation and execution as we continue to go through this journey.
So a few things there at the end. When he talked about passion and energy, I totally feel him on that because you can feel his passion and energy when you watch this guy practice. Now, granted, you guys haven't been able to, but you will be able to if you go to Steelers training camp. By the way, if you do plan to go to Steelers training camp, let me know. I love hanging with y'all and talking to people. So if you get a chance, do come to Steelers training camp in Latrobe at St. Vincent College. I plan to be there all summer long. Love meeting Steelers fans, and don't be afraid to say hi. Unless I'm working. Like if I'm interviewing players, I can't talk to y'all because I'm working. But back to the point here, Gerald Alexander is a very passionate coach. He is adamant. He is about communicating, getting his point across, and making sure, like, hey, you know where I'm coming from, and that passion is there. But I also think, and I think this is a very good sign for his future as a coach, I also think that he has that extra gear of thought in his head, where he knows how to be passionate, he knows how to communicate, but he also knows what temperaments to strike and what things to not say. For example, there in that question, I wasn't trying to get him to bark about Grady Brown. I was more so trying to say, like, hey, and I guess in the nature of the question, when I was saying, like, versus how have they liked this versus what they were used to. I guess it was, it inherently does ask that element of the question when talking about the Steelers' last secondary coach. But the thing is, the Steelers' last secondary coach was the guy that coached above him. So he saw firsthand. So when he says, I can't say, what they were used to. Yes, you can. You worked with them. But I also get, you're not going to throw your guy under the bus. And that was not my intention with the question. My intention was to kind of say, like, hey, like, this is a step. This is a step in a new direction, or a step in a different direction to get your intensity into the game. And I wanted to see how they embraced that step there. And I think that Gerald Alexander, it's tough to see right now because, Mike Tomlin loves to say, like, I want to see these guys get miserable. And when he says that, he's talking about in Latrobe. He's talking about those long, hot summer days when the sun is at its highest and everyone's sweating and you're tired and you've been hitting the same guy for 14 straight days. And then how's your mental capacity? How is your how is your fatigue? How are you dealing with your fatigue? How are you still processing and performing? That's what I think Mike Tomlin wants to push. And I think that's what Gerald Alexander wants to push. And he talked about, getting things right and giving themselves a chance. I think the Steelers are putting themselves in a position to have that kind of a chance this year to prove like, hey, we're in the right spots. Let's go execute. And that's going to be a big part of this team is can they execute in the right spots? If they're able to, especially the secondary, with the guys that are there, Joey Porter Jr., if he gets better at avoiding penalties and making big plays on the ball, I think there's a lot going for the Steelers secondary to figure things out this year. I think they have the personnel. I think they have smart players. Now it's just about actually executing. And so whether or not that happens, that's up to them. But I think Gerald Alexander is a good coach. And when I talk about the extra gear, like that's the kind of stuff that I look for with his mindfulness about what to and not to say and how to handle certain situations. He comes off like a future defensive coordinator, maybe even a future head coach someday. So I think Gerald Alexander really good at what he does, and I think he's going to be a benefit to the Steelers secondary in the long run. That's our show here today on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on all the social media all social medias, whether it's TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, Twitter, all the same handle everywhere at Carter Critiques. You can read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. You can find me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down your Pittsburgh Steelers on your favorite podcasting apps and then YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those daily episodes. Back here tomorrow with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.